Welcome back to another episode of In Swine Versation, Trails End to New Beginnings with Dale and Lori Stevermer. Welcome to the program.
Well, thank you for having us.
And we're happy to be here, Jim.
I know, Lori, we go way back with your time in the industry. You and Dale have had a good journey on the family farm. Let's talk about your story.
Well, I'll start, and you're right, it has been a bit of a journey. I mean, I actually grew up on a farm over by Truman, Minnesota. So we had pigs and cows, and I went to the University of Minnesota and graduated with an animal science degree and got involved with the feed business as a salesperson. And then along the way, I met this really nice pig farmer, and that's where our story starts.
And the story for myself and Trails End Farm. My grandfather grew up a mile west of here, and when he got married in 1917, bought this bare 120 acres and started his farm, started his family. My dad was the youngest son and took over the farm and moved out here to this site in 59 when he and my mother got married. They had 4 kids. I'm the third, so I'm blessed as a middle child. Graduated from Iowa State, spent 2 years as a loan officer with Farm Credit System, and then decided to come back and farm. And kind of like Lori said, all of a sudden there was a chance meeting, and here we are 35 years later.
How did you meet Lori?
Actually, we met selling feed. So I was the salesperson. Like every good salesperson, you're always trying to get new customers, grow your business. And I'd stopped out at the farm a couple of times and talked to his dad. And then one day, and we think there was fate involved with this. I mean, his dad just said, "I'm going on vacation. Do you want to talk to my son?" And, I said, "Okay, sure." And we met. So we like to say that every morning we can wake up and we can look outdoors and see where we met.
Well, we had another couple on here, so you're the second people that have met. Now we'll get to a little bit of the family farm, but on your farm, Dale, you're mostly providing the labor, and then Lori, you've spent your career working off farm in the feed industry. So that's how it's always been. That's how it is today. Does that work well together?
Yes, it has. And, especially early on, smaller operation, I could handle it on my own. Had an opportunity to expand it a little bit of that, and we'll talk about that later. But I always thought it was a good chance to leverage some information, some additional contacts Lori had in her job to keep me in contact with people off the farm.
Yeah, and for myself, I grew up on a farm. My brother and my cousin were coming back to farm, which is why I decided to get into the agribusiness side of things. And, really through my jobs in sales and marketing, it exposed me to just all different types of producers, feed dealers, just a greater part of the industry. And I've always felt that both being on the farm as a producer and being involved with agribusiness complemented each other well. I brought farm experience to my job, and I brought new ideas and new perspectives from my job back to the farm.
What does the family farm mean to you?
I've kind of rooted in history anyway, so there's some traditions. There's some there is some emotion involved with the fact that I'm working the same ground that my father and my grandfather did, and physically doing some of the same work, but also just realizing that they had set a good stage for myself so that I could be successful and also look at a future transition if it happens.
And for myself, when we talk about family farms, I think of generational. People often introduce themselves as I'm, a third or a fifth or seventh generation family farmer. And I really think that shows our heritage and also the pride that we have in what we do. I do think family farms, like a lot of other family businesses, have some interesting dynamics. I mean, these are the people we work with every day side by side. Then we go home with them, or we have holiday meals with them. And, certainly emotions, perspectives in that have to blend across a couple different scenarios.
So today's farm, you guys are a contract finisher, and then you have a crop farming operation. You guys released a great video through the Pork Checkoff, which I think it's the way of the future and how we tell our story. So it really helped tell your story, what you're doing, talk about sustainability, metrics, pork care, and how that relates to the video.
Well, and this is end up kind of being on me. It goes back a little bit over a year ago when National Pork Board was awarded one of the grants for USDA's Climate Smart Commodities Grant. I was being a member of the board of directors for National Pork Board, asked to help guide and shape what this grant was going to look like. So I spent over a year working on that. In early April, USDA came to National Pork Board and said, we have this opportunity to present at the G7 Ag Ministers Conference in Japan in 2 weeks, and we would like someone from National Pork Board to discuss all this. And then they said we specifically want a producer, not a staff member. So I was asked. I knew I could make it work, and did that presentation. And during that time, had conversations with people from Foreign Ag Service, USMEF, and the embassy, and a number of contacts like that. And when we'd ask them, what would help you? What can we do to help? It kept coming up. Is there a way we can get a video on the things you're doing so we can show it to people? Because you can tell about it, but you know, you go to a different system of agriculture, and they don't quite understand how we do things. So I was asked, and 2 weeks after I got home, we were able to do a first shot of some planting around the farm, and then followed up 2 months later with the more in-depth conversation interviews. So that's how that happened.
Yeah, and I would just add, I mean, we've had a lot of nice comments on the video, and I think part of it is because it resonates with people. It's sharing values. And when you go back and look over our career, we've spent a lot of time with advocacy, you know, talking to consumers, talking to other people, and it's really finding those common values that when you do that, that's when your story really clicks. So it's not just telling your story, it's sharing your story and finding those common values.
And the video, did it achieve what you were wanting?
I think it has. Within the last couple of weeks, it was translated with subtitles for the Japanese market. Like Lori said, there's been a number of good feedback comments we've gotten, whether it's producers or I've heard from a number of staff members, and a number of people said, yeah, this is what we need. This is what we can really go forward and work with. So glad to have been a help. There's additional footage to have in the tank somewhere.
And I would also say that it's triggered some questions. I mean, people will see the solar panels and they'll say, you know, tell us about the solar panels. How long have you been using those? And then that's a whole conversation. Or they'll see the butterfly garden or the cover crops and they'll be like, well, tell us about that. So we talk about sustainability. It's important. And I think having those visuals will often prompt those questions that hopefully lead people to adopt some of those practices.
And the cover crops is fairly like a recent project.
Relatively. I started using them in 9-10 years ago. Started working them into the operation and deciding how to use them. And probably about 6-7 years ago, I became 90 to 100% of the cropping operation, depending on the fields. I have found some benefits both for specifically nutrient capture of what's for fall applied manure specifically, but then also some benefits of erosion control and just keeping a living root. So finding that even in southern Minnesota, there's big benefits.
So you both have the great perspective to see the industry from different angles, from a producer standpoint, and then the associations that you're a part of. So Lori, rising the ranks at NPPC to president, and Dale, you're a member of the National Pork Board. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's really been a great experience to get involved, first at our state level, and then now as both of us sitting on national boards, which is probably somewhat unique, and myself as president-elect taking over as president in March. I think we get on these boards, we have some ideas, we have input, we have perspective, we have diversity of those thoughts, and that's what's really important to our industry. But the more you get involved and the more you learn from others, that kind of triggers more questions and conversations, and that's been really helpful, not just in our own business, but with others too. And it's just sometimes the more you know, the more you need to know, right? Because you just have those questions. But I would say for me, personally, being able to represent our industry in some key issues is an honor. And I appreciate the diversity of perspective of our board, all of our experiences. And I really think that makes us stronger as an organization.
And from my perspective, I'm humbled because a number of producers put their confidence and trust in me, and also the Secretary of Ag ends up appointing the slate of candidates to the board. So humbled that I was selected. It is a diverse group that we're with, and diverse in ownership, diverse in the voices they bring, and there really is a good blend. Our two national organizations are being led by producers that really care about the industry and care about the decisions that they make for projects and programs that are going forward.
Are you working on something with the climate smart and grant dollars from the USDA?
Yes. So I was involved in the subcommittee that brought forward the things that National Pork Board is doing. There's limits for what you can do with the dollar. Our grant was written originally for Missouri, Iowa, Minnesota producers only, that worked with Nestle's, we'll call it the feed shed, but that's where they get their pork from for their number of their food products. And we narrowed down from what we started with. We narrowed down our focus so that we could have something that we could administer, something that could get approved pretty quickly. So we're looking at cover crop and no-till, probably, and a couple of edge of field things. But our biggest differentiator is our manure management protocol that we have in there. So for producers that apply manure 2 times a year out of their storage facility, the fact that you're taking the manure out of that storage facility twice, putting it in the ground and capturing any gas emissions from that point, we are paying producers for doing that. We're looking at expanding the program to other states with USDA's permission, and also looking at a couple of other energy capture, energy reduction type of programs that we can put in place. So it's evolving, but we had to have a place to start.
And what about you, Lori, with the NPPC? Any opportunities that you're trying to continue to grow?
Well, I would say as an organization, I mean, we're really focused on freedom to operate. That's key to our producers. Things like Prop 12, Question 3, regulations obviously on top of mind for our producers. You're going through some challenging economic times too. I mean, we can't overlook the fact that we've been in a long period of not being profitable, and we've got months ahead projected to be not profitable. So that weighs on our producers' mind. So I would say as a board, we're really cognizant on the programs we're implementing and the work that we're doing, and making sure that it's really relevant for them.
And what about hot topics? Is there one hot topic you guys want to address today?
One that Pork Board is working on, we've been working on for years, and we've made a little shift in how we're doing it, but it's overall demand. We're continuing to invest in export markets, especially through an investment through USMEF. But you have to realize well, that is 30% of our pork consumption. There's 70% that is done domestically. So how can we inspire more people to buy pork, or more importantly, bring back some of the lapsed eaters and some of those that are looking at maybe reducing the amount of pork that they have. So we're targeting a couple markets in Hispanic. So we're looking at a multicultural type of push, both the Hispanic and the African Americans. And we're doing this in targeted cities at this point. So generally especially pork producers will not see these ads because they're not in those target markets or in the target market segmentation. So this is a culmination of a lot of dollars we've invested the last 2-3 years trying to figure out what our market is, where the opportunities are. And we are investing more dollars more rapidly than we thought we would, just to try to help push demand through into the consumer's hands.
Yeah, and I would list a few, hot topics. I mentioned Prop 12 and question 3, and those are important issues. Concern about becoming a patchwork of regulations across our states. And, it's challenging. It's a financial investment to comply with Prop 12 regulations, but if another state puts on a different type of regulation, how do our producers change for that? So certainly looking on a forefront through perhaps the Farm Bill to address that patchwork of regulations. I would say overall regulations in general are a concern, and we're seeing meat production go down in the EU, and part of it's due to excess regulations. And so we don't want to be that. We want to take advantage of the resources we have here in terms of our land, our crops, our American ingenuity, and continue to leverage what we can do as a low-cost pork producer. I would just say another kind of recent challenge that might not be on people's radar is just the line speed issue. And we're thankful that we've got an extension for another 90 days for those 6 plants to continue at the higher line speed. But with the number of pigs that are coming to market, the softer demand that Dale referenced, if we have to cut back the numbers of pigs that are marketed and back up our production systems, that would have a financial impact. I know a study that Dermot Hayes did had said about $10 a head. So that's significant.
So what about the decades of changes in the industry? So talking about adapting to changes is a common topic, but doing it is one thing. Is this a plan that needs to be developed for contingency or taking action?
Well, I'll let you go on this one.
Well, so when you talk about, decades of change, I think we've all talked about this, and one decade that sticks out in our mind as a decade of change was the 90s. When you look at the pork industry, we changed a lot in terms of our production, our nutrition, our genetics. We really ramped up our productivity. I would say, growing up here in southern Minnesota, one of the top pork producing states, it was fun to see the challenging of ideas from veterinarians and producers and industry, and there was a lot of growth. Unfortunately, at the end of that decade, we experienced some financial challenges, and everybody will remember that, but certainly a decade of growth. I think, we're not seeing that type of expansion of our industry now, but it's probably more incremental changes. What little changes or medium-sized changes do we have to make now as producers to adapt to these new things, these new issues that we just referenced a few minutes ago?
Are there any extra examples of adaptability?
For right now, one of those that may or may not be coming forward is gene edited breeding stock. So that's an adaptation that takes place both in the marketplace and on the farm. But that's one of those technologies that can come into play. We keep hearing about AI and how can sensor technology reduce the amount of time a person spends in the barn, but still maintain or improve the level of monitoring of the animals and potential disease detection. So, those are things that will be coming, and that we really have to look at. And then those are just two on the technology side.
And I would say for us personally, when you look back over our career in pig production, I mean, we've made changes in the size and style of our business, from a smaller farrow to finish producer to maybe a mid-size one. Then we scaled back again, and then we changed from farrow to finish to just, I shouldn't say just, but to finishing. And so, you know, those are changes we made to help our business be sustainable, so that we could match our production and our time and our talents with what we had in terms of resources. We don't know at this time if any of our kids are going to come back and farm, but I feel like, you know, our operations set up in a good spot, so that if one of them did want to come back, they could come in a little bit easier than being 120 sows fair to finish. So I think every producer has to kind of go through that mental checklist, right? Of no matter how big or small you are. I mean, what's your structure? What's your business style? What works for you, your family? We talked about families. That's a big input or big factor. And then just, you know, how does that deal with the economics that we face as an industry right now?
So for Trails End and your specific adaptability, you started with 120 sows, right? And then expanded to 320. And then you had labor challenges, and then you downsized back to 120. And then 7 years ago, you were faced with disease challenges in PRRS. Then you made a big change. So talk to me about that process.
Well, you stepped through everything that I did, and it, and there was more than just PRRS. That was a disease problem and health challenges, the way I look at it. And to an extent, I was worried about, for me, physical health, mental health, financial health, and then pig's health wasn't helping with those three factors. So it boiled down to the fact that the facilities I had, even though they're older, were easily remodelable and fit into a production system that's going to work for me. So that part wasn't a big shift. I really wanted to stay in the swine industry. I really wanted to continue to produce pigs and produce this high quality protein, but then also on the crop side, I wanted to have access to that high level nutrient that we call pig manure. So it's just the way it worked hand in hand. I wanted to stay in the pig business, and being able to be a contract finisher allowed me to do that. So was the decision hard? No. I've had a lot of people ask me that, and I said, no, it was really easy to chase those sows out of the barn. It got easier, and it might have been because of the age was a little bit of a factor, and then just the fact that I was not helping them produce as well as they could. So that decision was pretty easy to make.
Yeah, and I would just say that's one thing I appreciate about our swine industry here in the US. I mean, we adapt. We had different business models. You know, when you look through the decades, like we talked about, and whether you want to farrow to finish, whether you just want to focus on sows because that's where your time and talents are best spent. You know, we find ways to raise pigs and produce safe, wholesome, nutritious pork in a manner that's right for the environment. But we're not just a one size, this is how you have to do it type of system.
Yeah. So you're happy with how things are then? And
yes, I am. Yeah. It's enough different lifestyle. But I still have the responsibility of taking care of pigs twice a day, but the weekly or monthly situation of breeding sows and then farrowing and all of that, doing it this way has freed up more time for myself, and actually, especially where I'm providing the labor as I am, it allows me to be involved in the National Pork Board too.
now, what's the next step for other family farms? Because there's been a lot of transitions. Do you have any advice or?
Well, my first piece of advice would be have the conversation. Because it's a process, and like we said, it's family, there's emotions, there's structures, there's different ways that people own equipment and buildings, so have the conversation. And like I said, we don't know if our kids are going to come back and farm, but we've said, hey, if you're interested, just tell us and let us know. I would say also, just based on my experience, I mean, find someone to help you through that transition. If you're looking at exiting through retirement, find someone, whether it's a consultant or a lender, someone that has expertise in that area, because it's complicated from the business side, from the tax side, from the emotional side. And then realize that at the end of the day, you just need to make the best decision for you and your business and your family. And everyone's going to be a little bit different.
That's good advice, Lori. Now, we'll get you out of here on this. Tell me something about each other that makes you successful pig farmers, and then one thing you both can improve on.
So I'll talk about Dale first. I didn't know if you wanted us to talk about each other or the other person, but one thing I appreciate about Dale is that he is very even keel. It takes a lot to get him excited, and he has a very level-headed approach to things, and also a progressive approach too. I mean, even though we're smaller in size, he's always been very progressive in his thought process, and adds value to the board and the conversations he's involved with.
And my compliments to Lori, and go along the line of, she's a fantastic listener. And as she's doing that, she'll ask questions, but mostly those questions are not to throw you off or anything like that. She is really seeking to understand. So just trying to help her make better decisions as she is listening and going through these conversations.
I'll let Dale answer on what he wants to improve in, because I don't think that's fair for me to tell him what to do in that manner. I will just say for myself, I have a very collaborative nature. I think that's part of what makes me effective. I'm touching base with different team members, gathering input, and moving forward to make the best decision for the group or the organization. But with that, I find at times I second guess my decisions, like, should I have done this? Should I have done that? And I just need to be more confident in my process. And when I make a decision, go forward with it, and don't second guess myself.
That second guessing goes into personal life to an extent too, but so it's not just business decisions for her. My greatest weakness in farming in general is I'm really a poor marketer. I won't say I fall in love with the stuff I grow, but it almost seems like it at times. So if I've probably left a lot of money on the table by not being more progressive on that, and that's just how things landed for me.
Well, Lori and Dale, thanks for everything you guys do for the industry and for the great swine versation today.
Thank you, Jim. Can I just make one last comment before we close?
Yeah.
I mean, we are kind of unique in our tenure and our depth of commitment to the pork industry, and our volunteering and our advocacy. I mean, my words to your audience is to get involved, to show up. I mean, even if it's at one event that you don't think is very big, just get involved. There's a saying, the world is the world is run by those that show up, and we need people to show up. We're a small percentage of the population as agriculture, 1% or less, and we need everybody as a grassroots effort to move forward and help our industry continue to progress and be viable.
Yeah, show up, work hard, and eat pork.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes, I like that last part you put in there too. Thank you much for that.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.